In the parlor game called Humiliation, in David Lodge's 70s campus novel Changing Places, the players score points by confessing the famous works of literature they have never read. In a memorable comic climax, ambitious academic Howard Ringbaum admits he has never read Hamlet, instantly wrecking his career. Lodge's insight into the practice of literature is that everyone who steps into the world of books and letters risks humiliation. Rightly, for the well-being of culture and society, this is a competitive affair. Beneath the eye of eternity, it's a matter of life and death, either some kind of literary afterlife or, more likely, oblivion. Jane Austen's Emma, published 1815, No. 7. Jane Austen's Emma, published 1815, No. 7. For the past 2 years, as I've compiled my 100 greatest novels list for The Observer and TheGuardian.com, the fate of the classics has been my special subject. For one enraged online critic, the series was simply an elaborate headstone for a defunct way of thinking about literature. Never mind, not only was there a vigorous, sometimes splenetic, discussion of the list and its choices by a dedicated core of well-read correspondents, there was also a surge in subscribers. Some weeks, with titles such as Frankenstein, No. 8, or Heart of Darkness, No. 32, our virtual audience soared into hundreds of thousands. In total, between 1 and 2 million readers have interacted with the series through the Guardian website. So, what is a classic? There are many dueling definitions. T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, Italo Calvino and Sainte-Beuve have all written at length on the subject. Calvino's definition, a classic is a book that has never finished what it wants to say, is probably the sweetest, followed by Pound's identification of a certain eternal and irresponsible freshness. One necessary, but not sufficient, characteristic of a classic is that it should remain in print. Thereafter, the issue becomes subjective. Classics, for some, are books we know we should have read, but have not. For others, classics are simply the book we have read obsessively, many times over, and can quote from. The ordinary reader instinctively knows what he or she believes to be a classic. While our preferences inevitably reflect gender, nationality, class, and education, there is no accounting for taste. Speaking of taste, I selected, where possible, the title most central to the author's voice and vision, which is not necessarily the most famous. Consider Jane Austen. Pride and Prejudice is much loved. Nordhang Arabi is highly entertaining. Some readers revere Sense and Sensibility. But I chose Emma. Casual browsers sometimes took a moment to grasp that my list of top novels was, A, derived exclusively from fiction written in the English language, B, strictly chronological, and C, gave each writer equal space, an especially restrictive criterion. With a prolific writer, the selection of one classic text became almost intolerable. To cite an unfair example, Dickens, No. 15, David Copperfield, and Wilde, No. 27, The Picture of Dorian Gray, appear in the list on the same footing, with one novel apiece. With such rules, every thoughtful person must concede that any list is bound to have its ridiculous side. F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, published 1925, No. 51. F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, published 1925, No. 51. As the series unfolded, the more its true character as a Mission Impossible began to take shape. For example, these novels span about 3 centuries, roughly 1700 to 2000. Compiling a list for the first 100 years was relatively straightforward, from 1800 to 1900 progressively more difficult, and from 1900 to 2000, my arbitrary cutoff, perilously close to impossible. Here's why. In the century that witnessed the making of the English novel, the genre was almost exclusively the work of upper or middle-class English writers, predominantly male, and often with private means, living in the British Isles. Their novels were addressed to an elite minority, and expressed the concerns of a particular society. At this distance, in a way that's quite unthinkable in our own time, a decade, sometimes more than a decade, in which only one novel of classic status appears looks less like a literary crisis than an assertion of good taste. Between the life and opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman, 1759, and Emma, 1815, I did not choose a single competitive title. After 1818, another creative hiatus, then the Victorian novel roars into view, with a newly independent America in the picture for the first time. Now, judging the relative merits of 19th-century fiction, a once simple set of choices became exceedingly awkward. How to compare the way we live now, No. 22, with the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, No. 23, with Kidnapped, No. 24. Was it right to exclude Uncle Tom's Cabin, hugely popular and influential, in favor of Little Women, also best-selling? It was essential to acknowledge the emerging American literary tradition, but who trumps whom? Wilkie Collins, The Moonstone, was in, but James Fenimore Cooper, The Last of the Mohicans, did not make the cut. Was there a transatlantic bias? As Man Booker Prize judges will know, this issue does not go away. George Eliot's Middlemarch, published 1871-72, No. 21. George Eliot's Middlemarch, published 1871-72, No. 21. Then along comes modernism. Long before Conrad, Lawrence, and Joyce, the authors and publishers of the three-decker novel were in trouble. Some just gave up. Others found new kinds of employment. In the 1920s, after the cataclysm of the